In a small, peaceful town surrounded by green hills and thick forests, there lived a family that everyone admired. The father was a hard-working man who loved his twin sons more than anything in the world. He raised them with care, teaching them important lessons about life while making sure they always stayed close to each other. His boys were not just twins, they were best friends. They shared everything: laughter, dreams, and even their thoughts. People often joked that you couldn't tell one from the other unless you looked really closely. The father worked long hours at a factory on the outskirts of town, but he never let his job come between him and his kids. Every evening, no matter how tired he was, he would sit with them at the dinner table and listen to their stories from school. On weekends, the three of them would pack sandwiches and head out to the nearby lake for fishing trips. Those moments became some of their happiest memories. Sometimes they'd spend hours sitting quietly by the water, talking about random things, like what kind of car they wanted when they grew up or where they'd travel if money wasn't an issue. But life hadn't always been easy for this family. Years ago, tragedy struck when the mother passed away after battling illness. It was a tough time, especially for the father, who suddenly found himself juggling work, household chores, and raising two young boys all on his own. But instead of letting sadness take over, he chose to be strong for his sons. He made sure they felt loved every single day, and it paid off because the bond between the three only grew stronger with time. Ethan and Noah, the twins, were known throughout the town for their cheerful personalities, whether it was helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or cheering up a classmate having a bad day. They had a way of spreading positivity wherever they went. Their laughter was contagious, and people couldn't help but smile whenever they saw the brothers together. Even teachers at school loved having them around because they brought so much energy to the classroom. Their home was simple, a modest house with a small garden out front, but it radiated warmth. Inside, shelves were lined with books, trophies from school competitions, and framed photos capturing moments from birthdays, holidays, and vacations. Outside, the garden was their pride and joy. The father had taught the boys how to plant seeds, water plants, and watch them grow into beautiful flowers and vegetables. "This is our little piece of heaven," he used to say, patting the soil gently as the twins giggled beside him. Life seemed perfect, or as close to perfect as it could get. But fate has its own plans, and sometimes those plans are cruel. One chilly night, disaster struck without warning. The father had been working late at the factory, something he rarely did. When he finally started driving home, the weather turned nasty. Heavy rain began pouring down, turning the road slippery and dangerous. Despite being careful, he lost control of his car near a sharp curve. The vehicle skidded off the road and tumbled into a deep ravine below. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late. He didn't make it. Back home, Ethan and Noah were growing worried. Their dad was usually very punctual, and it wasn't like him to be late without calling. Something inside them told them something was wrong. So, despite the storm raging outside, they decided to go look for him. Grabbing flashlights and jackets, they hopped into their old car and set off toward the factory. Unfortunately, the rain-soaked roads proved treacherous for them too. As they drove along the highway, another car coming from the opposite direction lost control and crashed straight into theirs. The impact was devastating. Both Ethan and Noah succumbed to their injuries shortly afterward. By morning, news of the accident spread through the town like wildfire. Neighbors gathered outside the Harper house, struggling to process the unimaginable loss. How could such a loving family be taken away so suddenly? Friends and acquaintances recalled countless memories, their laughter echoing through the streets, the father's dedication to his work and family, and the twins' endless curiosity and kindness. Everyone agreed that losing them felt like losing a part of the town itself. As shock gave way to grief, preparations for the funeral began. The local church offered its space for a joint service, knowing that separating the father and his sons, even symbolically, would feel wrong. Volunteers came forward to help organize everything, from arranging chairs to decorating the hall with pictures of happier times. In the midst of all this activity, however, whispers circulated among the townsfolk. What exactly had happened that night? Why were they all gone on the same day? And most importantly, what would happen to their home now? Despite the questions lingering in their minds, the community came together to support one another during this difficult time. Meals were prepared and shared, stories exchanged, and tears shed openly. Everyone wanted to ensure that the Harpers' memory lived on, not just as victims of tragedy, but as symbols of love, resilience, and unity. Yet, as the days passed, no one could shake the feeling that there was still something missing, some detail yet to be uncovered that might explain the heartbreaking events of that fateful night. Little did they know, the answers would soon surface in a way none of them expected. The news of the accident spread quickly through the town, leaving everyone in a state of disbelief. People couldn't stop talking about it, at the grocery store, at the park, even in quiet corners of the local cafe. It felt surreal, almost like a nightmare that no one could wake up from. The father and his twin sons were gone, all on the same day. How could something so tragic happen to such a kind and loving family? Neighbors who had known them for years struggled to hold back tears as they remembered the laughter that once filled their home. One elderly woman recounted how the twins would often visit her after school, bringing her fresh flowers from their garden. "They always made me feel less lonely," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't know what I'll do without seeing their smiling faces." Others recalled how the father was always willing to lend a hand, whether it was fixing a broken fence or helping someone move furniture. He wasn't just a neighbor, he was a friend to everyone. His dedication to raising his boys alone after losing his wife years ago was something people admired deeply. "He worked so hard to give those boys a good life," one man said, shaking his head. And now this. As word of the tragedy reached further into the community, more people came forward to share their memories. Teachers spoke fondly of the twins' enthusiasm in class and their eagerness to learn. Friends talked about their playful antics and how they always looked out for each other. Even strangers who had only met the family briefly found themselves mourning their loss. The Harpers weren't just a family. They were part of the fabric of the town, but amidst the grief, there was also confusion. Why had they all been out? Driving late at night during such bad weather? What had led to this chain of events? No one had answers, and the uncertainty only added to the pain. The townsfolk tried to piece together what little information they had, but it didn't make sense. Some speculated that maybe the father had called the twins earlier, asking them to meet him somewhere. Others wondered if the boys had simply grown anxious waiting for him and decided to go looking. Whatever the reason, it was clear that fate had played a cruel hand. Preparations for the funeral began almost immediately. The local church, which had been a second home to the Harpers over the years, offered its space for the service. It seemed fitting. After all, the family had attended Sunday services regularly, sitting together in the same pew week after week. The pastor, who had known them well, volunteered to lead the ceremony. He spent hours reflecting on the lives of the father and his sons, searching for words that could capture their essence without reducing them to mere victims of tragedy. Volunteers poured into the church to help with arrangements. Women baked casseroles and brought baskets of fruit to share with grieving family members and friends. Men set up chairs and decorated the hall with photographs of happier times. Someone suggested creating a slideshow of images set to music, and soon enough, old photo albums were being passed around, each picture sparking a new memory. There was one of the twins as toddlers, covered in mud after playing in the backyard. Another showed the father teaching them how to ride bikes, his face beaming with pride. These snapshots painted a vivid picture of a family that had lived fully, even if their time together had been cut tragically short. Despite the flurry of activity, an undercurrent of sadness lingered in the air. Conversations were punctuated by long pauses and sighs. People hugged each other tightly, offering comfort where words fell short. Children, sensing the heaviness, clung to their parents' hands, unsure why everyone seemed so upset. For many, the hardest part was imagining the Harper house empty and silent. What would become of it now? Who would tend to the garden they had nurtured with so much love? As plans for the funeral progressed, one question kept resurfacing. What happens next? With no immediate relatives left to take charge of the estate, the future of the Harper home and legacy remained uncertain. A few neighbors proposed turning it into a community center or a memorial of some sort, but nothing concrete had been decided yet. For now, the focus remained on honoring their memory and giving them the farewell they deserved. Meanwhile, whispers continued to circulate about the circumstances surrounding their deaths. Some believed it was simply a terrible coincidence, a freak accident caused by the storm. Others suspected there might be more to the story, though no one dared to say it aloud. Deep down, everyone hoped for closure, for some explanation that would make the unbearable loss easier to bear. But as the days ticked by, it became clear that answers wouldn't come easily, or perhaps at all. Still, the town refused to let despair consume them entirely. Instead, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from shared memories and collective sorrow. Stories of kindness and resilience emerged. One person mentioned how the father had once helped rebuild a neighbor's roof, while another recalled the twins organizing a charity drive at school. These anecdotes served as reminders of the impact the Harpers had on those around them. They may have been gone, but their spirit lived on in the hearts of everyone who had ever crossed their path. By the time the funeral date arrived, the entire town felt weighed down by emotion. Hundreds of people gathered outside the church, spilling onto the steps and sidewalks. Many brought flowers, laying them carefully near the entrance. Others held handwritten notes or small tokens of remembrance. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with grief, yet tinged with gratitude, for the lives that had touched theirs so deeply, and for the chance to say goodbye one last time. Amidst the preparations, however, a discovery awaited, one that would shock everyone present and change the way they viewed the tragedy forever. Unbeknownst to anyone, hidden among the belongings left behind by the Harpers, lay a secret that would shed light on their final days and the choices they had made. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was mourning alongside the townsfolk. People began arriving early, their footsteps quiet on the damp pavement outside the church. Inside, volunteers worked tirelessly to ensure everything was perfect for the service. The pews were polished until they gleamed, and fresh flowers filled vases along the altar. Photographs of the father and his twin sons lined the walls, smiling faces frozen in time, capturing moments that now felt both distant and achingly close. One corner of the church held a special display, mementos brought by friends and neighbors. There was a fishing rod the father had used during countless trips to the lake, a soccer ball the twins had kicked around in the park, and even a small clay pot from their garden, its soil still holding traces of herbs they had planted together. Each item told a story, reminding everyone of the life the Harpers had built, not just for themselves, but for the entire community. Pastor Lewis stood at the front of the church, adjusting his notes and taking deep breaths to steady himself. He had known the family well, and delivering the eulogy felt like carrying a weight he wasn't sure he could bear. But as he looked around the room, seeing familiar faces filled with sorrow, yet brimming with love, he found strength in their shared grief. This wasn't just his responsibility, it belonged to all of them. While final preparations continued, Pastor Lewis noticed something unusual tucked away in a drawer. It was a small wooden box, weathered with age, its hinges slightly rusted. Curious, he opened it carefully, revealing a collection of letters inside. They were neatly stacked, each envelope addressed not only to the father but also to the twins. His heart sank as he picked up one of the letters, dated several months prior. Written in the father's unmistakable handwriting, it read, "To my beloved sons, if anything ever happens to me, know this: you are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and loved more than words can say." Pastor Lewis froze, his hands trembling as he read the words again. Why had the father written these letters? What did he mean by, "if anything ever happens"? The tone was tender yet unsettling, hinting at something deeper, something no one had anticipated. A chill ran down his spine as he realized this discovery might change how people understood the tragedy. Before he could process what he'd found, another volunteer approached him. holding an old photo album she'd been organizing for the memorial display. As she flipped through the pages, a folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. She bent down to pick it up, unfolding it cautiously. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. "Pastor," she whispered urgently, handing it over. "You need to see this." It was another letter, this one written by the twins. Dated weeks before the accident, it spoke of gratitude for their father's sacrifices, for the lessons he'd taught them, and for the bond they shared as a family. But there was something else too, a cryptic line that made Pastor Lewis pause. "We will always stay together no matter what comes our way." At first glance, it seemed like a sweet sentiment, the kind of thing any child might write to a parent. But paired with the earlier letter from the father, it took on a darker undertone. Was this simply poetic language, or did it hint at something more deliberate? Pastor Lewis felt torn between keeping the letters private and sharing them with the congregation. Something told him these words mattered, deeply, and that they deserved to be heard. As the clock ticked closer to the start of the service, Pastor Lewis decided to mention the existence of the letters during his eulogy. He wouldn't reveal their full contents, that felt too personal, but he would let the townsfolk know they existed. Perhaps it would provide some clarity, or at least spark reflection on the lives of the Harpers beyond the surface-level tragedy. When the doors finally opened and mourners began filing in, the atmosphere was thick with emotion. Friends, neighbors, teachers, classmates, all gathered under one roof to honor the memory of the father and his twin sons. Some carried tissues, dabbing at their eyes before sitting down. Others clutched hands tightly, drawing comfort from one another. Despite the somber mood, there was an undeniable sense of unity. Everyone present had been touched by the Harpers in some way, and today, they came together to celebrate that connection. The pastor stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat, as he surveyed the sea of faces before him. He started by recounting fond memories of the family, their laughter, their kindness, their unwavering bond. He spoke of the father's dedication to raising his boys alone after losing his wife, and how he poured every ounce of love into ensuring they grew up happy and strong. Then, hesitating for a moment, he mentioned the letters. "I came across something recently," he said softly, holding up the wooden box. "Letters written by the father and his sons. Words meant for each other, filled with love and perhaps more." The congregation stirred, murmurs rippling through the crowd. People exchanged glances, unsure what to make of this revelation. Before anyone could dwell on it too much, however, a young woman seated near the front stood abruptly. Her face was pale, her hands visibly shaking as she walked toward the podium. Pastor Lewis recognized her immediately. She was a childhood friend of the twins, someone who had grown up playing hide-and-seek with them in the neighborhood. She introduced herself quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I have something I need to share," she stammered. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Slowly, she pulled an envelope from her bag and handed it to Pastor Lewis. "Their father gave this to me weeks ago," she explained, tears streaming down her cheeks. He said to give it to him only if something happened." A collective gasp swept through the church. Pastor Lewis accepted the envelope, his fingers brushing against hers as he took it. For a moment, no one moved. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation. Whatever was inside that envelope, everyone sensed would change everything. As Pastor Lewis opened it carefully, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He unfolded the single sheet of paper within and began reading silently. His expression shifted, first confusion, then shock, and finally understanding. When he looked up at the congregation, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. What he was about to reveal would not only answer lingering questions, but also challenge the way everyone viewed the tragedy. The truth was painful, yes, but it was also profound, a testament to the lengths a parent would go to protect their children, and the choices families sometimes make when faced with unimaginable circumstances. The church fell silent as Pastor Lewis held the envelope in his hands, its contents heavy with implications. Every eye was fixed on him, waiting for what felt like an eternity. The young woman who had handed it over stood frozen near the podium, tears streaming down her face. Her presence alone seemed to amplify the tension in the room. Finally, the pastor cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "What I'm about to share," he said slowly, "is something that will change how we view this tragedy. It's not easy to hear, but it's important, for the sake of understanding and for honoring their memory." He paused, glancing at the congregation before continuing. "This letter, it reveals a decision made by the father, not just for himself but for his sons." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether they were ready for what was coming next. Some leaned forward, gripping the edges of the pews, while others clasped hands tightly, bracing themselves. The pastor took a deep breath and read aloud. "If you're reading this, I am gone alongside my boys. Please know we made our choice willingly. We chose freedom over suffering, peace over pain. Forgive us, for we leave behind love eternal." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, casting a shadow over the already somber gathering. Gasps erupted throughout the church, followed by stunned silence. Many covered their mouths in disbelief, while others buried their faces in their hands, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. A few people whispered urgently to those beside them, trying to make sense of what they'd just heard. Pastor Lewis lowered the letter, his own emotions threatening to surface. He looked out at the crowd, searching for the right words to continue. "I know this is difficult to process," he admitted, "but let me explain further. There's more to this story than meets the eye." Just then, the young woman who had delivered the envelope stepped forward again. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her words carried clarity and conviction. "I didn't understand it at first," she began. "When he gave me the envelope, I thought it was strange. He told me only to give it to him if something happened. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just some precautionary measure, like parents do sometimes. But now," she hesitated, swallowing hard before continuing. "A few weeks ago, Ethan and Noah confided in me about something. They had been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. The doctors said it wouldn't affect them right away, but eventually, it would lead to paralysis and immense suffering. Their dad found out about it and spent countless nights researching options, trying to find a way to spare them from that fate." Her voice cracked and she paused to compose herself. When she resumed, her tone was softer, almost apologetic. "He talked to me once, just once, about euthanasia laws in other countries. He asked me questions, wanting to know if I thought it was possible. Ethical, even. I didn't want to believe it at the time, but looking back, I see now that he was planning something drastic." By the time she finished speaking, the entire church was shaken. Tears flowed freely, and sobs echoed softly in the corners of the room. What had seemed like a tragic accident suddenly took on a new dimension. The father hadn't simply lost control of his car. The twins hadn't merely gone looking for him in the storm. This was no random twist of fate. It was a carefully orchestrated act of sacrifice. Pastor Lewis allowed a moment for the news to sink in before addressing the congregation again. "We may never fully understand why they chose this path," he said gently. "But one thing is certain, their actions were born out of love. Unconditional, selfless, unrelenting love. The kind of love that drives someone to make impossible choices, to protect those they hold dear, even at great personal cost." He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle over the room. Then, in a quieter voice, he added, "Let us remember them not as victims of tragedy, but as symbols of courage, as a family who faced unimaginable circumstances together, refusing to let fear or despair separate them. That bond, their unity, is what defines them, far more than the manner of their passing." As the service continued, the atmosphere shifted, subtly. Grief remained, of course, but it was tempered by a newfound appreciation for the Harpers' strength and resilience. Friends and neighbors shared stories of the father's unwavering dedication to his sons, recalling moments when he had put their needs above his own without hesitation. Others spoke of the twins' infectious optimism, their ability to brighten even the darkest days with their laughter and kindness. The letters discovered earlier became central to the memorial display, placed prominently alongside the photos and mementos. Visitors paused to read them, reflecting on the depth of emotion captured in each word. Though the revelations had been painful, they also brought closure, helping people piece together the puzzle of the Harpers' final days. Outside, the rain had stopped and faint rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden streaks across the damp ground. It felt symbolic somehow, a reminder that even in the midst of darkness, light could still find its way through. As mourners filed out of the church, many lingered near the steps, exchanging hugs and quiet words of comfort. Strangers introduced themselves to one another, united by the shared experience of saying goodbye to a family that had touched so many lives. One elderly man sat on a bench nearby, clutching a tissue in his hand. His eyes were red from crying, but there was a softness to his expression, a mix of sorrow and admiration. They were good people, he murmured to no one in particular. Real good people, and they loved each other fiercely. A woman standing nearby nodded in agreement. "It's heartbreaking, yes," she said. "But it's also beautiful. The way they stayed together until the very end. It's a testament to their bond. Not everyone gets to have that kind of connection." As the day wore on, the town came together in ways both big and small. Meals were shared, stories exchanged, and plans made to honor the Harpers' legacy. Someone suggested turning their garden into a community space where people could gather to reflect and remember. Another proposed starting a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in medicine. Inspired by the challenges the twins had faced, ideas flowed freely, fueled by a desire to keep the Harpers' spirit alive. But perhaps the most poignant moment came later that evening, as dusk settled over the town. A group of friends and neighbors gathered outside the Harper house, holding candles in the fading light. They sang songs, shared memories, and released balloons into the sky, one for the father, one for each twin, and one for the mother who had passed years earlier. It was a simple gesture, but it carried profound meaning, a collective promise to carry the Harpers' memory forward, ensuring they would never be forgotten. In the days that followed, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after such a loss. Yet the impact of the Harpers' story lingered, woven into the fabric of the town itself. Their courage, their love, and their ultimate sacrifice served as a reminder of the fragility and beauty of life. And though they were gone, their legacy endured, not just in the hearts of those who had known them, but in the lessons they left behind about the power of family, unity, and unconditional love. The days following the funeral were a blur of emotions for the townsfolk. Grief still lingered in every corner of the community, but it was now mixed with something else, a deep sense of reflection. Conversations about the Harpers had shifted from shock and sadness to admiration and understanding. People began to see their story not just as a tragedy, but as a testament to love, sacrifice, and the lengths a parent would go to protect their children. As the initial wave of mourning settled, the town rallied around the idea of keeping the Harpers' memory alive. Their garden, once a symbol of family unity and hard work, became the focal point for this effort. Neighbors came together to clean up the space, trimming overgrown bushes, planting new flowers, and adding benches where people could sit and reflect. Someone even suggested installing a small plaque near the entrance, inscribed with words that captured the essence of the family. A bond unbroken, a love eternal. The transformation of the garden into a memorial park wasn't just about preserving their legacy. It was also a way for the community to heal. Every weekend, volunteers gathered to tend to the plants, share stories, and support one another. For many, working side by side in the soil felt therapeutic, almost like they were nurturing the same spirit of hope and resilience that the Harpers had embodied. But beyond the physical changes, there was a growing movement to honor the twins' dreams and aspirations. Friends recalled how Ethan and Noah had always been curious about science, often spending hours reading books or conducting little experiments at home. Inspired by their passion, the town decided to establish a scholarship fund in their names. The goal was simple: to help students pursue careers in fields related to medicine and research, ensuring that the challenges the twins faced wouldn't be forgotten and might someday lead to breakthroughs that could save others. Fundraisers sprang up across the town, organized by teachers, classmates, and neighbors alike. Bake sales, car washes, and charity runs brought people together, turning moments of loss into opportunities for connection. At one event, a local artist painted portraits of the father and his sons, capturing their warmth and vitality. These paintings were later auctioned off, raising thousands of dollars for the scholarship fund. Each contribution, no matter how small, carried meaning, a tangible reminder of how deeply the Harpers had touched lives. Meanwhile, the letters written by the father and his sons continued to resonate with everyone who read them. Copies were shared during community meetings, printed in newsletters, and displayed prominently at the library. They served as both a source of comfort and a call to action, urging people to cherish their loved ones and live with purpose. 1. Mother admitted that reading the letters made her realize how much she took her own family for granted. "It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind," she said. "But this reminds me to slow down and appreciate what really matters." For Pastor Lewis, the discovery of those letters had sparked a personal journey of reflection. He spent hours poring over them, searching for deeper meaning in their words. What struck him most was the father's unwavering optimism, even in the face of despair. Despite knowing the grim prognosis his sons faced, he chose to focus on love rather than fear. His decision to end their suffering may have been controversial, but it was rooted in an overwhelming desire to shield them from pain. Pastor Lewis began incorporating these themes into his sermons, encouraging his congregation to embrace empathy and compassion, not just for others but for themselves as well. "We all carry burdens," he reminded them one Sunday morning, "and sometimes those burdens feel too heavy to bear alone. But if we lean on each other, if we open our hearts to love and understanding, we can find strength in even the darkest times." His message resonated deeply, prompting many to reevaluate their relationships and priorities. Families started having difficult conversations they'd been avoiding, while friends reached out to mend old wounds. The ripple effect of the Harpers' story extended far beyond their immediate circle, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. Yet, amidst all the healing and growth, questions remained. Some struggled to reconcile the father's actions with their own beliefs about life and death. Was it right to intervene in such a permanent way? Could there have been another path forward? These debates played out quietly at coffee shops, dinner tables, and late-night gatherings, reflecting the complexity of the situation. One evening, a group of close friends sat around a bonfire in the backyard of the young woman who had delivered the envelope. She had become a central figure in the narrative, her role as messenger making her privy to details others could only speculate about. As sparks floated upward into the night sky, someone finally voiced what everyone had been thinking. "Do you think he regretted it?" She hesitated before answering, her gaze fixed on the flames. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "But I do know this. He loved them more than anything. And I think, in his mind, he believed he was giving them the best possible ending, not just for them but for himself too, because living without them, I don't think he could have done it." Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. Around the fire, heads nodded in agreement. While opinions varied, one thing was clear. The father's decision was born out of love. However complicated or painful it might seem, it was a choice made in the shadow of unbearable circumstances, guided by a fierce determination to keep his family together, even in death. As the weeks turned into months, the town found solace in rituals. On the anniversary of the accident, hundreds gathered at the newly transformed memorial park to pay their respects. Balloons were released once again, this time accompanied by handwritten notes tied to their strings. Children ran through the garden, laughing and playing, while adults stood nearby sharing memories and tears. It was a poignant juxtaposition, joy and sorrow coexisting, reminding everyone that life moves forward, even as we hold on to the past. The years that followed, the Harpers' legacy continued to grow. The scholarship fund supported dozens of students, many of whom went on to make meaningful contributions to medical research. Their garden became a sanctuary, visited by people from neighboring towns who sought peace and inspiration, and their story, though heartbreaking, remained a beacon of hope, proving that even in the face of unimaginable loss, love has the power to endure. But perhaps the most enduring impact was felt within the community itself. The tragedy had forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about mortality, morality, and the fragility of life. In doing so, it had strengthened their bonds, teaching them to lean on one another during tough times. The Harpers may have left behind an empty house, but they had filled the town with lessons that would last forever. And so, though their laughter no longer echoed through the streets, their presence was still felt in the kindness of strangers, the resilience of families, and the beauty of a garden tended with care. Theirs was a story of love and loss, yes, but above all, it was a story of humanity. Years passed, and the town continued to evolve. New families moved in, children grew up, and seasons changed, painting the landscape with vibrant colors each spring and autumn. Yet, amidst all these transformations, the memory of the Harpers remained etched into the heart of the community. It wasn't just a distant story anymore. It had become part of the town's identity, woven into its fabric like the roots of an old tree. The memorial garden flourished, cared for by volunteers who came from near and far. Each bloom seemed to carry a piece of the family's spirit: bright daffodils that swayed gently in the breeze, lavender bushes that filled the air with their soothing scent, and rose vines climbing trellises as if reaching toward the sky. People often visited the garden alone or with loved ones, finding comfort in its tranquility. Some left notes tucked under stones, sharing their thoughts or expressing gratitude for the lessons the Harpers' story had taught them. Others simply sat on the benches, watching sunlight filter through the leaves, feeling connected to something larger than themselves. Every year, on the anniversary of the accident, the town held a special gathering at the garden. Families brought food, musicians played soft melodies, and children decorated the space with handmade crafts. The event wasn't somber. It was celebratory, a way to honor the lives of the father and his sons, rather than dwell solely on their loss. During one such gathering, a teenager stood up to speak. She had been awarded the scholarship fund created in memory of the twins and was now studying medicine at a nearby university. Her voice trembled as she addressed the crowd. "I never met the Harpers," she began, "but I feel like I know them. Their story has inspired me to work harder, to push through challenges because I know someone else might benefit from my efforts someday. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I think about how much they loved each other, and it reminds me why I started this journey in the first place." Her words resonated deeply, drawing applause and tears from those listening. For many, her speech encapsulated what the Harpers represented: resilience, hope, and the enduring power of love. Even those who hadn't directly interacted with the family felt their influence guiding them through life's ups and downs. Over time, the scholarship fund grew beyond anyone's expectations. Donations poured in not only from locals, but also from people across the country who had heard about the Harpers' story. Scholars whose lives were touched by the fund went on to make significant contributions in fields ranging from genetics to neurology. One recipient even helped develop a treatment protocol for rare diseases, dedicating her research to the memory of the twins. In interviews, she often spoke about how their courage motivated her to persevere when experiments failed or funding ran low. Back in the town, the annual gatherings became more elaborate, turning into festivals that drew visitors from neighboring areas. Artisans set up stalls selling handmade goods while local chefs prepared dishes using ingredients grown in the memorial garden. A small stage hosted performances by school bands, theater groups, and poets who recited verses inspired by themes of unity and sacrifice. These events transformed the tragedy into something beautiful, a celebration of life, love, and legacy. But perhaps the most profound impact of the Harpers story was felt in quieter, everyday moments. Neighbors checked in on each other more, frequently, offering help before it was asked for. Parents hugged their kids a little tighter, cherishing every moment together. Friends resolved conflicts quickly, unwilling to let misunderstandings linger. The Harpers' choice to prioritize love over fear had sparked a ripple effect, encouraging others to do the same. One day, a middle-aged man walked into the library and picked up a copy of the letters written by the father and his sons. He had lived in the town for decades but had never fully understood the depth of their bond until now. As he read the words aloud to himself, tears welled up in his eyes. That evening, he called his estranged brother, a relationship fractured years ago by pride and stubbornness, and apologized. They spent hours talking, laughing, and crying, finally bridging the gap between them. Stories like these weren't uncommon. People found inspiration in the Harpers' unwavering connection, using it as a mirror to reflect on their own relationships. Teachers used their tale to teach students about empathy and compassion. Counselors referenced it during therapy sessions to highlight the importance of open communication. Even strangers passing through town would stop by the memorial garden, leave flowers, and write messages thanking the family for reminding them of what truly mattered. As the years rolled on, some wondered whether future generations would remember the Harpers' story. Would it fade into obscurity, overshadowed by newer headlines and changing times? But then, something remarkable happened. A young filmmaker from the town decided to document their legacy. She interviewed friends, neighbors, and recipients of the scholarship fund, weaving their accounts into a heartfelt documentary. The film premiered at a local theater, drawing packed audiences who laughed, cried, and clapped throughout the screening. Word of the documentary spread quickly, earning recognition at film festivals nationwide. Viewers praised its authenticity and emotional depth, calling it a poignant reminder of humanity's capacity for love and sacrifice. Clips from the movie were shared online, sparking conversations about mental health, end-of-life decisions, and the ethics of euthanasia. While opinions varied widely, everyone agreed on one thing: the Harpers' story deserved to be told. The filmmaker later revealed that making the documentary had changed her perspective on life. Growing up, she had taken her close-knit family for granted, assuming they would always be there. Learning about the Harpers made her realize how fragile those bonds could be, and how vital it was to nurture them daily. Inspired by their example, she began organizing workshops in schools and community centers, teaching others how to have meaningful conversations about difficult topics. In the end, the Harpers' legacy transcended tragedy. They weren't remembered for the pain of their deaths, but for the beauty of their lives, their laughter, their kindness, their unbreakable bond. Their decision to face unimaginable circumstances together had ignited a movement, inspiring countless acts of love and courage. And though the physical reminders of their presence eventually aged, the garden required replanting, the letters yellowed with time, their spirit endured. On a crisp spring morning, years after the accident, a little girl skipped through the memorial park, her pigtails bouncing behind her. She stopped near the plaque inscribed with the words, "A bond unbroken, a love eternal," and tilted her head curiously. Who were they? She asked her grandmother, pointing to the portraits hanging nearby. Her grandmother smiled softly, kneeling beside her. They were a family who loved each other very much, she replied. And because of that love, they'll always be with us, in our hearts, in our actions, and in the way we treat one another. The little girl nodded thoughtfully, then reached out to touch the plaque. For a brief moment, the sunlight caught the edges of the metal, casting a warm glow around her. It was almost as if the Harpers themselves were smiling down, grateful to see their story living on, not just in memories, but in the choices people made every day to love fiercely and live fully. And so their legacy continued, not as a chapter closed, but as a story still unfolding, a story of hope, connection, and the enduring power of love.